It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, and we are talking about incredible classic beers. And we've brought a beer out from Ayinger. We've done some Ayinger beers in the past, and this is their Maibock or Maibock. This is the beer that comes out, as you can imagine from the name, it comes out in spring. It is a Bock beer or a pale lager. It's also sometimes called a Hellesbock. And this beer actually comes in a little bit higher in ABV. I believe this is around 7.2%. 7%. I'm sorry, 7%. I was close. It's a 7% beer, so it's a stronger lager, a little more of a malt presence than your typical lighter lager would have. There's great beers from Ayinger. We've talked a lot about something like Celebrator, their Doppelbock, which is absolutely fantastic. These are guys that know how to make Bock beers or stronger lagers really, really well. This brewery's been around since the late 1800s. I was trying to find exactly when this beer was first brewed. Unfortunately, a lot of these breweries don't really have that information readily available on their sites. It's kind of hard to track that down. It's information I guess a lot of people aren't really all that interested in. And what ends up happening when I try to research these things, I get a lot of AI responses. So the AI response was that this beer was first brewed in 1978, but I don't really trust it that much. So, but I do know that this beer is more than 10 years old, which is one of the prerequisites for the beers that we try to do here, because I've been drinking it for more than 10 years. So let's just go with that. This is a fantastic beer because it walks that line of having the richness and the full-bodied nature, not only full-bodied, but fuller nature of a 7% Bock beer, while really being ridiculously drinkable. Also having a little bit of this kind of caramel or toffee sweetness, this breadiness, this toasted biscuit, which is really nice, but also balancing out with some floral and more herbaceous hops to make this a really dry and drinkable beer. So the kind of the approach of the beer, you get a little bit of sweetness, but it finishes really, really dry. I would contend, and it's one of the greatest things you can do with a malty lager, is to do those two things, is to give you the flavor profile and complexity you want with big malt flavors, but balance it out with bitterness and fermenting out those sugars and making this a clean and drinkable beer. And this is a very clean and drinkable beer that is insanely flavorful. Ayinger in general, I just talked about Celebrator and some of the other beers they do. You really aren't going to go wrong. I oftentimes say, if you can't find this beer, which is, readily available, it is a seasonal beer, so it won't be available year round, but it should be readily available because Ayinger is a pretty popular import brand. But if you can't find it, you're watching this video in the middle of the winter or something like that, later on after we've done it, and you find another one of their beers, you're going to be happy. That's another great thing about these beers from Old Favorite Friday. There's very few breweries that make a beer that's been featured on this series we've been doing for over 3 years that you really can't recommend everything they do, because the ability to make these beers so well and to make these classic styles and do them with incredible amounts of repeatability shows great brewing practices and shows that they know what they're doing. And for a brewery that's been around for 10 years and a brewery that's been around since the late 1800s, for me to be saying they know what they're doing probably isn't the best compliment they've ever received, but there you go. Absolutely fantastic brewery with great beers. This is a beer that is a really nice beer for yourself or to get your friends into that are into lighter lagers, and they might want to kind of step up their game and try something a little bit more interesting that has a little more complexity to it. There's also some subtle fruit notes in here as well that add just more to it than what you're typically going to be drinking as kind of like a pale lager that you're just going to crush for watching a football game or a baseball game. This is a really good beer to try when you're trying to expand your repertoire and your knowledge of craft beer, going to a classic German brewery with your classic German beer styles, really some of the styles that helped to create the entire craft beer movement in the US that came along. It's really leaning back on these old classic styles and then us tweaking them and making them our own and trying new things. But nothing makes me happier than an American brewery doing a classic style like this and doing it really, really well. And we have these guys like Ayinger to thank for that. Going into food and beer pairings, I always like to talk about that. I love to pair my meal with my beer. I always say this, and it's probably like a broken record for the people that watch these on a regular basis, but you're always going to get, if you ask for suggestions from an AI about, what I should pair with this, it's always going to be pretzels and schnitzel. That's what they're always going to tell you, because these are the kind of foods, pub foods and things that these beers are traditionally enjoyed with. In that vein, I make a really nice, well, I think it's really nice, a chicken Milanese, which is a, a thin chicken. It's a schnitzel essentially, but an Italian version of it. I use panko breadcrumbs. I actually use a little bit of mustard, ground mustard, and some smoked paprika in my flour, my batter for that. That with arugula and tomato on top of it, some artichoke hearts. That's how I like to serve my Milanese. And I think going with that bitterness of the arugula and the richness of the fried chicken and the spices and the flour, I think would go really well because this beer is well balanced. It has a little bit of hot presence to give you floral and herbal flavors. That's going to be accentuated by the arugula and also add some bitterness, which I like a little bit more bitterness in beers like this, and that can complement each other really well. Another thing that, as someone that lives in Florida and just had one yesterday, a Cuban sandwich would go really, really well with that. You have the mustard-based sauces that go well with these beers that are on a Cuban sandwich, but you have the richness and the fattiness of the pork and the cheese that lends itself really well to a lager that has a little more body, which is a Bock, a 7% Bock, as opposed to like a really light and crisp lager. So I think that would pair up with the fattiness of the foods really well. Great thing about this is you can pick this up, and especially if you're living in Florida, you can get a great Cuban sandwich in so many different places. So you can try this pairing out and let me know if I'm crazy or not, but I think it would work really, really well. If you guys are so kind, please give us a like and subscribe on this video. Please continue to come back with us. Give us suggestions for beers for Old Favorite Friday. We love getting your suggestions and hearing what you guys are drinking. And there's tons of other videos here on this channel. If you like beers like this and you're passionate about craft beer like we are, and the classic craft beers, the beers that you can go back to time and time again, we'd love for you to check them out. Well, hopefully we'll see you next week. Cheers.